this is a project that was first done back in, it must have been the early 90s in Enschede in Holland. A friend of mine called Marten de Wind, who was also in the same band that we'd started, we made a tape, and I think it was probably about an hour and a half long, discussing nothing. And it was a truly remarkable tape, and I kept it for many years, and somehow I made a copy of it, but through all my searching I've been unable to locate it. So I thought it a good idea to recreate it as the last day in the listening project, to cover this topic that back then seemed to be important, and in some ways today it's still also important. So that's a little bit about where it started. I mean, I suppose it actually started earlier than that. I think when I was, studying a little bit in Manchester, I must have been about 18 or 19, and I was very keen to find out where everything came from and where it was going to, and wanted to sort of understand the world as young people do, and maybe even older people. So I used to sort of read a lot of books, and I was quite inspired by a friend of mine who was also a musician, who went in the name of Hillbilly. It's actually Aidan Doherty, and he used to he was very well read, much more read than I was at that time. He was into Gurdjieff and I suppose Paul Coelho and lots of sort of quite, at that time certainly, different sorts of writers. And he's into agnostics, and one of his many talents was, I suppose, reading up on this sort of thing. And he was also, looking for a defining truth. I don't know really whether such a thing as a defining truth actually exists. But however, we were in search of this grail, I suppose one could say. And through many hours of thought and, laying in bed and I suppose just looking at things from different angles and etc. I think I woke up one day and realised that it was nothing. I mean, essentially we came from nothing, and we all go back to nothing. And in the between bits, we sort of, have all these wants and desires, and but they're all sort of created out of, thin air, and they all disappear really back into thin air too. I mean, they're there for a moment and then they're gone. So, and at the time, to some degree even now, it was a fairly profound sort of moment. And then I suppose later on through the years, I mean, there's, I suppose, scientific evidence to support this concept. I mean, the most obvious one, of course, is the Big Bang Theory, which tends to sort of dwell upon that. But I believe there's sort of, much more sort of examples of nothing and how it I suppose can sort of relieve the pressure about a lot of things. And of course, I mean, that is something that I suppose we're going to try and explore, in this topic. The original tape, I think, like I said, was about an hour and a half. And so quite curious just quite how long this one will actually be. But maybe we should explore a little bit of nothing. So let's just let the tape roll and experience this full nothingness. Unfortunately, because where I'm actually staying at the moment, there are some background noises, and they might sort of ruin that a little bit, because you truly need to have and it's like you can focus the mind right into that minuscule point where infinity and time begins. So let's just appreciate some of that for a little while now. So probably here is quite a good example of how hard it is to get to where there's, the blank canvas, where there's nothing, because so often, especially more so now, we're surrounded by something we understand or something we don't understand. But and if we can take that away, we can come to a more, I suppose I want to describe as a nothing place. I think there was also some relevance in this to the fact that a lot of the things that we, I was about to say preconceive or have definitions of in society. What is the true value, or how much notice should we give them? And of course, when you're younger, that's a very hard question to answer, because it is the natural idea to try things, and sometimes to give them a value that we think that's important. As I've grown later on in life, and I suppose from a Buddhist point of view, they would say that this value, as one might describe, or as targets, and that's something that Pema Shunron refers to, will in a way create this immediate tension and this sort of difficulty, because we want to achieve that target, and that may be the job, the money, I know, planting a flower or growing a particular bush. However, by having that, we're immediately sort of setting ourselves up for an emotion that possibly we might not really want to experience in that time and place. So these sort of targets, and sometimes we make them, sometimes we don't. So yeah, everyone wants to avoid that, then really they should focus in on the nothing, as that is truly revealing, and also not. It is by its own definition a bizarre concept in a bizarre place. So let's just get a bit more of that nothingness. So let's focus for a moment on other people's nothing. And I suppose, we have instances, I suppose people would refer to in Africa where people have nothing to eat. And I suppose we also have, in other instances, a rich man's nothing, which could be, it's just waste or garbage. You have also, I suppose, an emotional sort of nothingness, and that is probably the most interesting, possibly. And I would say that's probably the most interesting because when you're there, that's not a lot. You're sort of at quite a powerful place, although I suppose many people try to sort of ignore that and will do a lot of things obviously to get around that, because it's kind of strange doing this, because I'm sort of in one way trying to recapture what was 20 years ago and then place it 20 years later. And of course that's different because the times are different and I'm different, and also my understanding of it's different. However, and I suppose there is a fair amount of influence here coming in from particularly some of the writers that I read and or have read, and but Pema Chodron sort of talks about the feeling this sort of sensitive spot, this being able to live with it, sort of, and I would almost describe it as sort of turning in. So when you're sort of feeling this, this rawness or this sort of emptiness, it's almost turning into it. And a lot of people sort of turn away from it. They could take stimulants, they could get drunk, they'll eat, or they'll watch TV or do another sort of, and rather than face this sort of where there's actually nothing sort of going on, and it's a natural part of life. We're not going to have things going on all the time, and and people would like to believe that there is, or there's some sort of super life, and we're going to find something that's going to fill all this sort of thing. But it's not really possible, because in some ways part of life is dull, and it is boring, and it's certainly repetitive, and it's fairly mundane. And so if you don't have to counteract the other actions that one can take, then you have to sort of turn into this and just be there and sort of feel it, and it tends to create a sort of a true sort of balance in a way. You're no longer having to fall outside to pressures and to other people. You're just there, and there's no conflict, and there's no anguish and no pain, because there's nothing. So it's in a lot of ways it's quite a beautiful sort of thing. We then move on, and we obviously have to do things, and other things come along which are good or bad. They are the experiences that one experiences. However, they are that moment is sort of the center, and it's very powerful. And if one can be aware of when the other moments are going on, that essentially you're sort of also going to end back at this spot. You think, then it I suppose makes the journey much more interesting, and it is important in the journey that you're going to have to face many things, and things that possibly we would rather not face, or make us very uncomfortable. But I mean, they're going to come in if we don't, face them. They're going to sort of, disappear. You can end up back at nothing, or alternatively, if you do, you have a different. It's no longer about, shall I say, the outside thing. It's about what is going on inside of you. It's about your own experience. And all our experiences are different. We might say, we wish we had the experience of someone, or we wish we had maybe the life of someone, or we wish we could, feel, be that person or something. However, there's no one that's having that purely that experience that we're seeing, and possibly very much in the modern day age. We can manipulate so many things. So we can project that, we get this, and we can project that, get that, and we probably quite like to get these things, and maybe we actually do. However, unless we're able to sort of, live in this moment, where, or live in all moments, there's a part of you that's training to be able to sort of, not become angry, or not become upset, or I suppose we quite like to feel euphoric, but it's in the same ways that if we treat the same one, and I suppose as Rudyard Kipling said in some respects, treat the same thing with the same amount of grace and dignity, then and realise in the end, well, it's not anything really. It's just we're here for a while and then we're gone, and we try to make the most of that. In fact, I would say every second counts. But that is the reality, and maybe some of the sort of compensating actions that we carry on are they're a lot of work and take a lot of time. And quite frankly, I'm not really sure they mean anything to anybody. People, I suppose, will give them meaning, and they'd like other people to give them meaning, but the reality is, I suppose you could say, Mother Teresa will do, very good at actions, and that's good, of course, and that touches on something different than really sort of the nothing, because I think that's a different sort of area that one would have to, can come to, because it is obviously important not to harm people. So you say, well, do nothing in some ways, and in my sort of, I suppose, outside that sort of experience, I would say, it's very important that you generally do have to love, and a way to try and sort of love everyone, which is very much a sort of Christian message. But the reason, and I'm certainly not a Christian in any respects, but certainly the reasoning behind it is that people only do the best that they can do. So, I mean, if they could do better, they would do better. There's absolutely, without doubt, that doesn't matter. No one chooses to do something stupid. I mean, you know, they all believe they're doing something smart. Even people that, you know, might be doing something that, you know, they think, you know, oh, in a different way, they've been clever. You know, if they knew of a clever way to do it or a better way to do it, they would do it. So, and the moment, of course, you know, you feed any sort of, I suppose, pain or hurt or other things to that, you then, it doesn't go any way further. I mean, people are only able to adapt and to change and you know, to do something if in a way they're supported and loved or helped or, you know, given positive feedback. This is an age, you know, that, well, it's reality. So, and it's, I mean, it's fairly testing. You know, I can certainly say that, you know, a lot of the experiences and certainly the relationships that I've had, you know, have been very testing. When one starts to sort of approach from that angle, it sort of becomes easier, you know. Yes, I mean, it's not, you know, you have to spend a lot of time with people and certainly family when you have to do it, and you hope that, you know, one day that they'll find something or progress, and, you know, things will get easier for them and stuff like that, and in the meantime, you know, you can't shout at them, and you can't, you know, not deal with them or not even talk to them, because, well, that's not going to help neither. So, but I kind of sort of deflect really from the main topic, which is, of course, is nothing. So let's just refocus back on some of that nothingness. So, as one can see, it's quite easy to fill time, certainly with nothing. In fact, one would really could almost argue that it's harder to create nothing than it is to actually create something. And as a lot of the time when we're creating something, we're not really sure what we're creating. I mean, we set out with an idea or a plan, but quite often it doesn't work out that way, and I suppose sometimes it does. However, I suppose the true pursuit of nothing is certainly lowers the stress levels, but coming face to face with yourself is okay. It's okay. And I suppose on that building block, you're then able to look at things from a different angle, or a different point of view, and maybe it changes the value too, and so we're able to come down to the essence of our sort of, time here. And able to feel that essence much stronger, and not live in fear or worry or So the future is nothing. This is a good or powerful thing. Why? Well, I suppose it goes back to the thing is it's this moment. It's not, that's all we have really in life, is this moment. Though I know them, we don't have what's gone and we don't have what's coming. We have now, so, and it's here where one should live and do, and I suppose resolve and work out. I suppose we can let what's gone, in the past define us. And it does, it's a degree of an awareness, which is a whole different area of things. You become aware of it, then, I don't know if there's much you can do about it, but you're certainly aware of it, and that's a whole lot within itself. However, the value you can give it, well, it's gone. It's nothing. You can't go back and change it, and you can't relive it, and you can't mould it, mend it, or anything. So, I suppose, looking back at, and I must have been, 22, 23 when we did the first tape. There are a lot of things there, as I suppose as young people do, and they know that are there, and we were able to touch upon them in some respects. However, we weren't able to fully grab it at that time. And I know there's a great element of fun to this, but it's important that it's out there, in an age where we're told so many things and feel so many things. This focus is good. And sort of when you sort of hit that point, it sort of in a lot of ways should become very clear. Although I'm sure there's a lot of other things that can contribute to that. So, to recap, the future is nothing, the past is nothing. Now we're not really even sure of. And everything comes from nothing, and it goes back to nothing. So, and I'm sure there's people who say that wasn't very defining. It wasn't massively poetic. But that's life, really, isn't it? let's have a bit more of that nothing. Well, that was quite a good bit of nothing. So let's try another track of nothing. Yep, that was good. I wasn't really quite sure whether I could do this, but it's been easier than I thought. It was, and I suppose quite enjoyable too. I suppose as it is nothing, it's it's not that difficult really. But yes. So I don't really have any thoughts to finish with, other than nothing. So I'll say thank you for listening if you've made it this far, and wish you all the success going forward. Thanks.